I mean, you did, but where do they come from?
Where do blue jeans come from? I don't know.
They don't grow on trees, I'll tell you that right now.
The sun goes up, the sun goes down. Can't explain that. We live on this giant quarter we call Earth.
Quarter?
I mean, you know.
Are you a flat earther? Be honest.
I mean, what? What's that? I don't know what that is.
It's round and flat. That's all I'm saying. There's two sides. What's on the other side is what I want to know. If the Earth is flat, what's on the other side?
You know, that's just exactly what they want you to think. You know?
Is there any other side?
You're just one of those sheeple who thinks there's got to be two sides just because you're in this two-dimensional way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's extra-dimensional. Okay. Yeah.
Is that real?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like origami. You're familiar with origami, right?
Nope.
Yeah, they fold in space-time. I can tell you went to improv class. That was excellent. You left me with so many places to go.
Yeah.
I think what you're looking for was yes and.
I don't prompt well.
Oh, well.
You know, somebody asks you a question and they're setting
no idea what that's like.
They're setting you up for they want you to say, "Oh, really?" or "Tell me more." I hate that.
You've got no friends on this side of the table right now.
I absolutely refuse to do that. Mike will be telling me a story. He'll sort of say some sort of leading phrase like, "Yeah, I had a really weird day today." And I just look at him. And then
I can just see
we both dig our heels in. So then he just doesn't say anything else. And I'm just sitting there getting madder.
And he's doing the same thing.
He's like, eventually she's going to say, "Why, dear?" And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to say it. So finally, if I say anything, it's, are you going to make me ask you, or you're just going to tell me what you want to tell me?
I usually just make up whatever I want, what I think would be interesting for them to say next. So if someone's like, "Dude, you wouldn't believe who I saw in the hallway," I'm like, "Tom Selleck." And they're like,
no, they hate you.
No, not Tom. I was like, "Yoda." No, Yoda wasn't in the hallway either. And I keep interrupting them and going until they finally just say who it is.
So then they don't ever do that to you anymore.
Nope. They're like, "You'll never guess what happened to me in the elevator today." And I'm like,
then I'm not even going to try.
Split into two halves and fell on the floor. And they're like, "No, Aaron, that's not even close to what happened." I'm like, "Well, then that's boring, whatever it was."
Have you ever had the experience of...
No.
Someone says, "Guess what happened?" And then you guess it and you're correct. And then they're really pissed. That's the best. That's the best thing that's ever happened when that happens.
It's also the worst thing that ever happens because sometimes the way you guess is not very complimentary.
Well, so if it's "Hey, I've had the worst day." Like, "Oh, what did your grandma die?" And it's like, yes.
That's actually exactly what I was about to say. I'm not talking about me here, but let's just say I know a guy who has a sister.
There was this guy
had a little sister who was gonna have a baby. When she asked what we thought the name was gonna be.
Oh, I've heard this one. This is great.
My wife said, and she goes, "Yes," and I said, "Oh, you're joking, right?" And then she said, "No." And I was like, "Well, that's a pretty name." Oops.
I mean, you're kidding, right? Because that's just far too gorgeous to name a baby.
I know. I mean, I didn't even really think anything bad going into it. It was just the timing of what happened. If I was this hypothetical person.
Yes.
It all happened too perfectly for her to use a deadpan sense of humor to just say yes. So I was trying to think of ways that it was funny. I'm just making this worse. We will mark this and kill it with fire. Yeah, one way that I made friends as a kid was playing video games.
Really? Mm-hmm. Is that a segue?
No, a segue is a thing you stand on and it rolls you different places.
Oh.
I always get asked that question.
Like roller skates. When I used to wear roller skates was when I would be at an arcade.
An arcade.
Playing video games.
I'm not really sure how we're going to get to our topic today from that. But,
yeah,
we mentioned
we'll
quarters
get there
earlier.
via roller skates. We'll skate on over, just like, because the name is Dreamland. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dreamland, the RetroBlasting podcast. I am Melinda. That's Aaron over there.
Hi, I'm Aaron.
And tonight we are talking about... I don't even really know how to describe what we're talking about. We're talking about...
let me help.
Go ahead.
If you remember earlier, I mentioned a quarter and a flat earth joke, unless that got cut from the pre-show and nobody knows what I'm talking about. But if that didn't happen and you guys happen to know, there's something that we used quarters for when we were kids. And it wasn't just to roll towards the teacher and annoy them in class. It was actually to feed into these little machines, called video games.
Yeah. And the subtitle of the sort of documentary that sponsored this or spawned this entire chain of thought is called A Fistful of Quarters. That's the subtitle.
Dreamland would like to announce that Fistful of Quarters, King of Kong, did not sponsor this episode.
I wish. No, they did not. So King of Kong is a documentary that I saw back, I don't know, maybe 2009?
I think it was 8 or 9 for me.
I'm pretty sure it was 9 or 10 for me, actually. It was on Netflix at the time. Michael and I watched it together. And, of course, we both were sitting there on the couch just livid during watching it. But don't worry if you haven't seen it, because we're going to take you through the highlights of everything that basically happened. If you do want to watch it and you don't want it, quote-unquote, spoilered for you, then maybe... watch the documentary and then come back and listen to the episode.
Well, and to be fair, if you've been paying attention to Reddit or other kind of pop news places over the last month or so, it's going to be a little bit spoiled for you anyway, because there was some closure to this documentary that kind of just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I just looked up on my phone one day and saw that it was the news story come out, and I sent it right over to Michael and you. So
yeah, a lot of people have been talking about this. So, I mean, this is almost old news at this point, but I thought that it would be... I was watching a lot of YouTube videos and listening to a lot of podcasts about this topic, and, I've seen the documentary and I've read a lot about this, so I kind of have a little bit more background, but I wasn't coming across anything that really synthesized everything all in one place. So I thought this would be kind of the perfect... It's similar to some other podcasts we've done where we talk about the showbiz thing or the Cabbage Patch Kid thing, where it's a weird lawsuit and a weird sort of battle between a couple of different people with all this controversy. So it kind of feels similar to those in a weird way. Yeah. So I just thought it'd be a cool thing to kind of go through and sort of give the backstory of what's in the documentary and some stuff that wasn't really covered completely in the documentary, and then sort of the updates. So to set the stage for you, back in the 80s, arcade games were super hard, and they were also super popular. And a lot of people were competing to be the high scorer on a lot of these things. But there was no official scorekeeper. There was no centralized way that there wasn't an internet, obviously. There wasn't really a way for people to keep up with overall who had the highest score ever. But
there was an image problem too going along with it. So a lot of people looked at folks who went to the arcade on their roller skates and played video games. It was just like a kid's thing. So there wasn't a lot of respect shown towards these players the way that they are now. So maybe not so much in the world that we walk around in. Well, we walk around in it, but I digress.
On top of it, because it's flat.
The flat world that we walk on with no curvature whatsoever it's really kind of in its heyday right now. So esports has gotten huge, not just from the perspective of CNN and coverage on the television, but you have this giant network out there called Twitch, which has sort of picked up where YouTube wasn't filling all of the needs that fans had. And people every day are watching these superstars, I mean, in the millions, play whatever the current hot new game is. Like right now it's Fortnite. Everybody's flipping out because they put Thanos in Fortnite, which is a sort of an open world shooter. And you can get basically look like Thanos and run around in that world and do stuff. And I mean, if you log into Twitch at any time and just look at some of the top streams, you'll see there are just millions of people watching people play video games. But back in the 80s, it wasn't going to be on your 2 or 3 TV stations that you had coming over the air. The only way you'd hear about it was kind of the way that this documentary opens with a photograph of who are our main characters here that are standing behind their cabinets.
Well, there's Billy Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
There is
little Billy Mitchell.
There is so here's the thing. Let me just go ahead and just start off at the beginning of this. There are a lot of people in the story, a lot of names, a lot of people. And for me, as someone who has a hard time with names, I'm going to do my best here, but it's a little confusing. I've got notes in front of me, but there's a guy I think his name is Steve. It's not Steve Wiebe, but it's a different Steve who is in that photo. So let me sort of give that backstory. So there's a guy named Walter Day. He sort of became known as the scorekeeper for all of these things.
You may know him from Wreck-It Ralph as the animated, not coach, but referee.
Yeah, he walks around with kind of a referee shirt. But back in the 80s, he compiled scores but he went around to a bunch of different arcades, like I guess maybe in his area. He lived in Iowa, and he compiled scores over 4 months from like all of these different machines, and sort of started this sort of massive, probably a proto spreadsheet of some sort with all the different games and the people who were at the top and like their scores and dates and stuff like that. And so he started his own arcade called Twin Galaxies. It's in Iowa. And so people eventually started hearing about him. Now, they didn't explain how. I don't know if it was through like little fanzines or, whatever, but they would call him and sort of try to figure out where they ranked, because there wasn't really any other centralized place. So he became the de facto referee. So because of that evolved into this whole thing where Life magazine did some sort of like scoop on him and this arcade, and all of these big like top scorers in different games were brought there for this exclusive Life magazine thing in 1982. And so this photo sort of starts off, and there's actually a couple of other documentaries that are out, one in particular that's kind of going through and talking to all the guys that are in that photo, including Billy Mitchell. Billy Mitchell is sort of like one of the key players, or the key player in this entire story that prompted us to do this episode. So he's this guy who he had a top score in Pac-Man, and he also had a top score in Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. His
early claim to fame was that he completed Pac-Man, getting everything you could get in Pac-Man. It was considered, I think his words, but a perfect game. And I mean, you can hear the awe in some of the other people around him now. We'll find out a little bit more about where some of that all comes from later. But it is very interesting, and, you can't help but be impressed. And even to this day, I don't know if you want to cut this out if it's too soon, but,
Too soon?
Too soon in the podcast. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to create anything point. But the fact that he had all of his records stripped, and everywhere they were. I don't think his Pac-Man one is in dispute. I think the fact that he's been permanently banned. We'll figure out how we want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think they took them all.
They did. They took them all. Yeah, but I don't think that one has been disputed.
So, like I said, Billy Mitchell played Donkey Kong, and it was one of the harder platform games to play. And
they describe it as fiendish. It's absolutely trying to just murder your sanity.
Yeah, he actually had the first high score that was noted by this Twin Galaxies guy back in 1982. And as far as I can tell, he totally legitimately did get that high score. But he had that score in place for 18 years. He was the high scorer on the record. But then in 2000, there was this guy, Tim Scurby. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry.
Needed more citrus.
Sczerby.
It rhymes with antidote. I don't know.
It's pronounced Suffolk. Anyway, so Tim S. beat Billy Mitchell in 2000. But then, I will post in the show notes, there's a cool link. There's this place called the Donkey Kong blog that's got kind of a history of the record and who had what and when and all this kind of stuff. And so that
really heated up after this
documentary. It did. But in the 2000s, that's when all of these new records started pouring in. So for 18 years, it's Billy Mitchell. And he had a score of 874,300. And then this Tim guy comes in August of 2000 and has 879. So like basically 5,000 more points. And then Steve Wiebe in 2003 had a video that he sent in that was like 947,200. And but then that one was kind of contested a little bit because they didn't really – it gets really tedious, like why they keep contesting Steve Wiebe. But apparently that first one, it looked like it was some sort of an emulator. So, yeah, it's funny because so there's this documentary, and let's just skip ahead really quick because it makes sense. When you watch the documentary, the whole gist of the documentary is there's this guy, Steve Wiebe, who is kind of portrayed as this – really nice guy. He's a family man. He's got kids and a wife, and he's just sort of – he's a little bit social anxiety, but he's really smart, and he's borderline almost autistic is how they describe him. He's just very like kind of OCD, and like that's what makes him really good at video games. And he learns all these patterns is the way they're describing it. Not that he's like some sort of weird – like he's just a super nice guy. When they're interviewing him, he's just like – Captain America nice guy, right?
And they played it as kind of a beautiful mind.
Almost, but he doesn't
they kept
seem...
showing these little patterns. Like when he'd move his hands in certain parts of the interview, you'd actually see them draw a white streak underneath it, and then how he would repeat it as he went forward, especially while he was playing the drums.
Right.
So they were kind of showing how patterns were a part of his life.
Yeah, and patterns are part of like the way he thinks. And Billy Mitchell in the documentary is clearly portrayed, whether it's... I mean, I don't know how hard it was to portray him this way, but... because he seems like this, but very sort of egotistical and more like showman-like, you know, like he's all about his image. He's all about being number one. And I don't know. So he's kind of got this smarmy, he's got like a mullet, long hair guy with like the trimmed beard thing going on.
The overly trimmed beard.
I
call it a hair club for men beard.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Because it's too perfect.
Right. His hair is super perfect, and he wears like a tie, and he sells hot sauce. I mean, he's just like a wheeler dealer kind of used car salesman, slimy kind of a guy.
Yeah. Everything he says he believes is the absolute best thing that he could have said. He speaks about himself in the third person.
His eyes sort of dart around and don't quite make contact with you, so you get the impression that he's lying.
Yeah, he makes the best faces at people while they're talking, I'll have to say.
It's
this
impressive.
Is where, before we did the show, I said I was going to kind of stand up and defend a little bit of this. You know, during the show, we're going to talk about this character, Billy Mitchell, and there's going to be a little bit of angst and frustration with who this guy is and what happened in this. And we're going to lay this out. You're going to kind of see how this went really poorly for him. I just want to say that I've known a lot of people who kind of had some of his same mannerisms and some of his same issues with fitting in a crowd or not immediately off-putting people. And when I look around us as a geek community, you know, I see like, you know, when we go places, I see people who are like that and maybe aren't representing themselves very well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was one of those things where he didn't do a good job of defending his image in the movie or since then, as obviously we're going to see. But, you know, I kept trying to see through the surface of this because I feel like I've known people like this who kind of irritated me and put me off and then found out, hey, they're actually all right. That's just kind of how they interact with the world around them, and it's kind of abrasive. And then in this case, you know, that's the end of where I'm standing up for Billy Mitchell. I just didn't want this to seem like we're just bashing a person here. There's definitely grounds for some of the frustration we have with this guy.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I don't know Billy Mitchell. Like, there's every possibility that when you get to know him and get past the outward facade of what he puts on, that, like, you know, as a husband, as a friend, as a coworker, whatever, that he's a really cool guy. I don't know. I'm certainly not judging him as a human being in that way, but I do feel pretty confident in saying that he has a lot of qualities. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Like, so here's the thing. Documentary filmmakers have a lens of what their story is that they're trying to tell. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking that into account as well.
When you correct for that, you still get the feeling that if you were stuck in an elevator, you'd probably have some unkind things to say. I
feel that way. So what happened, the guy, Steve Wiebe, who, he's in there, like we said, he's sort of this guy who's gotten really good at he got laid off from some job that he had, and
he was
as an engineer,
and that was the town, that was what everybody did in that town. And beyond all that, it's funny, it's like he stumbled into Donkey Kong because he was
out of work.
He needed something to do all day. He was a baseball player in high school, and purportedly a very, very good one. And what you see in the documentary is this echo of what's going to happen with Donkey Kong in his life, where he would get to a certain point where he was about to get recognition and about to choke. Lead, and either he would choke, or if in the case of the baseball, his dad even says, I kept him in too long. Like, he basically threw his arm out. If you've ever been around baseball tournaments, they do those back to back to back to back on a weekend and run these kids until the very, very, like, they're out of juice by the end. And the kids with the most stamina and who can carry through are the ones who usually end up winning. And he kept his star pitcher. He was proud of his son, kept him in too long, and he just didn't have it in his arm to throw it in front of all of those people. And, in some cases even on, televised, depending on where he was. He wasn't able to pull through with that game, and things like that had happened in his life all the way up to getting laid off from work kind of unexpectedly. And he said he was looking around for something he could be good at, and he just saw that particular record and said, you know what, I can do that. I can beat that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he had a cabinet in his garage, and he just played it constantly because I guess he had a lot of spare time during that period. And
what kid didn't want to buy an arcade cabinet just to have?
Exactly. So, he actually submitted 4 different scores between 2003 and 2004, 3 of them in 2004. The last one is the one that is mentioned in the documentary that's over 1 million. It's the first over 1 million score. And so one of the things that happens is that, so in the meantime, between 1982 and 2004, when that was going on, Billy Mitchell has become very enmeshed with the folks at Twin Galaxies. Mm-hmm. So the guy who started the entire thing, that Walter Day guy, the referee, he and Billy Mitchell are thick as thieves. They're super good friends, and Billy Mitchell has all these records, and he's this amazing guy, and he's got this image. He's like the rock star of gamers and stuff like that. And so they sort of financially profit from him being like this great, successful guy who's got these high scores. And so they are financially invested in him staying at the top of his game, like literally at the top of his game.
Yeah, he's like their sponsored athlete. And I thought Day was very interesting because watching this, you'll get your own opinion of how he is leading that group. He was very into transcendental meditation and
folk music
and folk music or rock music. I mean, he had a piano album, I think, that he put out at one point. So he was kind of this Renaissance man in his own way of doing this. And he was just kind of doing this. I don't even think he got paid, allegedly. I don't know how you stay in business without, getting paid.
Yeah.
But he had this weird way of seeming to very sincerely like Wiebe. Like he would go back. He would approach Wiebe and he would accuse him of something, and then he'd walk it back other times.
Yeah,
and I thought that was but the way he did it wasn't the same way I see a lot of people do that today. He genuinely seemed to sincerely want Wiebe to know that he thought he, was a great player.
I didn't get that. I did not feel that from him. But what I did get from him is he reminds me so much, this whole situation.
Of Aragorn with short hair and old.
Oh, God, no.
You're going to see it now when you watch.
Oh, God, that's awful.
Yeah, I just messed it all up for you.
Oh, man. No, so I've known a lot of musicians in my life, and like local musicians, like smaller, obviously not super famous ones. So when you've got people who are, they have like fans who are going to every single show. They show up every single time the band plays. And like I was the girlfriend of the drummer or the girlfriend of the guitarist. And then there were these fans that also showed up. And they were more rabid than me. Like I'm there to support my significant other, but they're there because they're like rabid fans.
Because of who you were, you would have inherited kind of a businessy side of it too.
That's right.
There were always things you needed to handle. Even
right. I'm doing the merch.
Musician,
I'm doing that, all that. But these people were like, and they were.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you do.
And they were competitive with each other over who was the biggest fan.
Yeah.
And they were to the point where like they would have their favorite person in the band, and like no matter what happened, that person could do no wrong, the band could do no wrong.
Right.
And it's sort of like a cult of personality thing. And if you've ever been around anything like that, it's kind of it just has a certain weird vibe to it. And so
that is what I picked up on with Mitchell right away.
Absolutely. He is like
earlier when that guy was talking about how he got beat so badly and then became his best friend.
Yes.
There was something like in the middle of that sentence where he seemed hypnotized. Like suddenly
there are people who just have that ability to.
And he was surrounded by them.
Yeah.
Like
they end up with group. I've known several people like that who they can treat people like crap. They can be whatever, but because they are however they are, they just have this charisma. It just overpowers a lot of people, and they. So that's what I was getting was that this Walter Day guy, the other guy.
See, Day seemed complicit in it, which is why I thought it was so fascinating when he walked back some of his statements. It was like for brief seconds he would snap out of the spell. Mm-hmm. And which
the Steven Sanders kid did not. Like Steven Sanders was one of the guys who was in the Life magazine thing, and he had lied about his score, which it says here in this article that he had a score of 3 million something, but
which is so obviously
he didn't.
Yeah.
And so Billy Mitchell, interestingly, is the one who busted him out and kind of talked to him and made him confess that he had lied about his scores, and then this Steven Sanders guy became his friend. And
it's like turning an agent or something. It was very masterfully
and he's
done.
like this. There is this cadre of people. A lot of them tied to Twin Galaxies as referees and all because there are official referees who watch you play a game and vouch for you making a score. The problem is that within this network that developed over that 20-year period from 1982 as Twin Galaxies grew and became more well known across the country, those people are all enmeshed and friends and all this kind of stuff. And there was apparently a lot of lying and not
covering
just Billy Mitchell, but to sort of, exactly. Like, we're all really awesome gamers. I'm going to vouch for you that you played this game and you made this score, and because I'm a referee. And
let's not forget or discount the fact that this being that it got started in the 80s meant that there's a lot of stuff that we're savvy to and hip to now because it's either in the news or, if we're involved in online communities, we get involved in the nuts and bolts of, okay, when do you kick somebody out of a chat room? When do you say someone's broken a rule? How much do you stand up for that person? How do you enforce all of these rules? It's something that it's like a set of manners or acumen that we've picked up more and more as we've moved into this information age. Back then, there was no like HR oversight. There was nobody going, hey, by the way, this is kind of a conflict of interest. I mean, that probably wasn't a term that was just thrown around.
Right.
So, it really was just a bunch of guys who were looking out for each other in the beginning. And then you have Weeby come along from the outside, and he sends in a videotape, which I was very impressed. He actually mounted a camcorder over his shoulder to show the screen.
Yeah.
So that he reduced the amount that you could even say he had cut or, cheated on what was this will come into play later, cheated on what was displayed on the screen. And when he sent in the video, they went ahead and gave him the record. And then all of a sudden, but Mitchell got upset about this and decided that he was going to contest it and say, well, what if he had cheated somehow?
Well, the reason that happened, and what they say in the movie, is that there's this guy. Hang on, I gotta scroll down and find out what I can't. It's Roy Schilt, Mr. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So, but they didn't discover this till after they started looking into
his initial submission. Weeby's submission was accepted, like you said, and then they found out that he had gotten the board that he was using from Roy Schilt.
That's interesting. When I was watching I just recently rewatched the documentary, I don't even know how this happens, but they sent a couple of these refs that they had in house. They sent them over because they were nearby to Weeby's house, and to
examine the machine
while he wasn't there, and his wife, who is just sort of think of like the sweetest church lady you've ever known, who's just trying to raise her kids, don't you know, and don't worry about a thing, and I'll bring all the food. You know,
she's just very much like that.
Yeah, just awesome, salty of the earth kind of person. And you know, she stood her ground and said, "No, this is my house. You're not going to come in here.
She's
I'm
like,
not
I'm
comfortable
leaving.
with you.
You need to wait till Steve gets home."
Well, while they ended up talking her mother into letting them into the garage, and I don't know how, but you know, just, hey, can we get some sweet tea and some cookies? Sweet. Now I'm going to go in the garage. And while they were in there, they noticed a box that had Roy's name on it.
That's right.
So I think they were already fishing.
Okay.
And then, and I don't know, because there are some things that you've mentioned from your other research that sounds a little out of order from what I saw in the documentary.
Right.
So, I mean, this may be a case that there is a public story, and then there's even more.
There are some things. There's a website called the Donkey Kong blog at .blogspot.com.
Wow, still a blogspot.
Yep, Blogspot. It's actually really good, though, and there's a segment in there that's called the Donkey Kong World Record History, and you can really sort of follow date by date and score by score, and also it lists, like in this big table, the player's name and also whether it was submitted via video or whether it was live, and so it's pretty interesting, and it literally goes through not only all of that, but it talks about what the differences between real life and what was in the documentary, because as you'll note in the documentary, they don't even mention Skirby or Serby or however you say it. I'm sorry, Tim S. His score, the one that actually initially beat Billy Mitchell's 1982 score. They don't mention that at all. Because
they also don't seem, in my recollection, don't mention the earlier tapes that he.
No, they don't. So what they do mention that at the time that Steve Wiebe is doing his thing, he's trying to beat Billy Mitchell, and some people would be like, well, why is that? And because this Serby guy beat him. Right. Well, that's because he submitted his tape and or did he? Hang on, I got it right here. He had a video. He submitted that and beat Billy Mitchell, and then Steve Wiebe submitted a video. They didn't accept it. They did, but then they kind of were like, no, this is an emulator. That's not in the movie. Then Billy Mitchell played a live game and defeated that Tim Serby's score. So Billy Mitchell was again the champion as of 2004. That's the score that Steve Wiebe tried 3 times, and eventually 4 times to beat. He had done that over a million score in 2004 and submitted it, and that's all they really mention in the movie.
Yeah, and that one wasn't rejected because of emulation. That was because they didn't trust the source.
They didn't trust the source. So then
but they could never actually prove that the board was doctored in any way.
No, but they still didn't. It was
so tainted by this other guy.
That's right.
Which they give you just a little snippet of this other guy's sort of what he did outside of the games, and it's enough for you to. They definitely painted him with a slightly unbalanced brush, but then when you're just doing the interviews with the guy, he seems, at least as put together and as capable of having a logical conversation as anyone else. Yeah, but when
you see his videos of Mr. Awesome and like his dating tips on how to pick up women, it's a little off-putting, I will say.
It's definitely off-putting, but none of that actually has to do with, the game. But it does give you a sense that he probably had a sense that he would do whatever he needed to do to get back on top.
Roy Schilt.
And there were a couple of other moments, I think, that the documentary kind of tries to gloss over. They talk about how how Weeby got the board from Roy. He says, and I didn't know about their backstory, but in just a breath before, he actually mentions a couple of references to that backstory with Mitchell. So,
well, maybe, I mean, obviously he knows it now.
I think in that guy, and just from the way, and I don't know Weeby either, I think he tries to see the best in people. So it may be one of those situations where he knew there was some bad blood, but didn't.
Maybe he just didn't know the extent of it, or maybe he did and he's straight up lying. But it doesn't really change. Again, like you can't judge a person based on how they're coming across in a documentary, but you can judge just straight up facts. So, you know, by the history of what happened was they were like, okay, well, Steve Wiebe, we're not going to like really accept your over $1 million score. And the only way we're going to accept a score from you to beat Billy Mitchell, who at that time was considered the champion of Donkey Kong, is for you to play it live in front of all of us at Fun Spot, at this specific place. And so,
which, by the way, they think they even amongst themselves had decided that Donkey Kong machine was haunted. Because it was harder than the average Donkey Kong machine, which I think is interesting to note because they had a problem with Weeby's board, but in the show it becomes obvious that no two machines are the same. They're they're almost like pinball machines. There's just slight differentiations in the board and how it was manufactured, and that would have an effect in an analog sort of gaming world. Yeah.
Well, Steve Wiebe's from Redmond, Washington, but he traveled all the way to Iowa. He made the trip because he was like, well, I really want to, get the score. So he goes there. He's there for like 3 days or whatever, and he's playing, and he gets like a 985,000, which beats, at that time, Billy Mitchell's score was 933. So he plays that in front of all of them. And he gets to the last screen of Donkey Kong, which apparently does this weird glitchy thing where after a certain number of seconds, it just kills you. It's the kill screen.
Yeah, and that was one of the first moments where I saw some of the really culty behavior, because you had that guy who calls himself Billy Mitchell's protege, and how he kept he would do these interviews about Weeby, but he would do them about 7 feet away while he was playing.
Yeah.
And loudly, I don't know, maybe he'll crack under the pressure. And then as he was approaching the kill screen, he mentions that he wants to be the next guy to get to his kill screen live, and then goes around the place saying, hey, we got a potential kill screen coming up. You want to go over there? And he starts pumping the crowd to make it even more
He gets everybody in the entire place to come over and stand behind Steve Wiebe while he's like at the very, towards the end of the game, and he's like sweating bullets, and he's, doing everything he can. And
I think this is where his athletic background came in.
I mean, he said in the interview that it energized him to have all those people standing around him. But I mean,
think about someone who choked on the mound in the national championships. That was probably not nearly as nerve-wracking as that other moment.
Yeah.
Although I could be wrong.
All these guys, like the Steve Wiebe guy knows he's in the lion's den.
Yeah.
And they're all standing around him. Even though they're being nice to his face, I felt like it was very insincere.
Oh, it was rough.
They were rude and all this kind of stuff. Billy Mitchell, during all of this, is refusing to show up. Now, by this point, the camera crews are involved. Now, I kept watching the documentary feeling like this feels so staged.
Yes, there were several moments where at least Billy Mitchell's side of the conversation or Weeby's side of the conversation had to be staged, because there's no way they could have had some of those things mic'd the way they did.
Well, it was weird.
And if you read, I'm sorry, I'm just like...
No, go ahead.
The director of the documentary mentions that there was a lot that he couldn't put in about Billy Mitchell because of interstate laws about what you could say.
And there's a lot of stuff.
Recording phone calls.
They were recording phone calls, but So what I was going to tell you, now that we're at this point, going back, the reason why this whole documentary film is being made is that there's a guy who was a friend of Steve Wiebe. He's in the documentary. He's just a buddy of his. He happened to know this.
Is that the motorcycle jacket?
Yeah. Okay. He happened to know the director of the documentary, Seth Gordon. Now, Seth Gordon is a film director. He's a producer, screenwriter, film editor. He had gone to Yale. He taught high school in Kenya. He actually shot the Dixie Chick documentary Shut Up and Sing prior to this movie. And then he made this movie because he was just the cinematographer on that Dixie Chicks movie.
And this it's important to know this is kind of before the Netflix revolution,
Sure.
the Amazon revolution.
Yeah, this was 2007.
Documentary filmmaking. This was now. Is this contemporary with Super Size Me? You know, as far as timeline goes,
sort of.
So people were just starting to figure out that if you did a really creative documentary, this one really it tinkers with that, where there's graphics and weird things happening, you could make a lot of money doing it.
Right.
So it's a weird time for this.
Well, he did do well with this, and he ended up in the future directed Horrible Bosses, Pixels, and Baywatch.
Well, yeah, Weebies and Pixels.
He's in several of these things actually, and the Seth Gordon also executive produced episodes of The Goldbergs and the show Breaking In. So he's done a lot of stuff since this, but so thinking of all of those things, I'm just sitting there going, okay, well, how did this come to be? But apparently, they were going to make this documentary just kind of about people who were still trying to maintain their records at these old arcade games. And this guy just happened to go, oh, by the way, you should talk to my friend Steve Wiebe because he's got this crazy story of da-da-da. Like he had already submitted several tapes.
Yeah, and they talk about Billy Mitchell as the subject of this documentary.
They didn't even try initially, supposedly. The initial goal was not to make a movie about just Steve Wiebe. It was going to be about a bunch of different people. There was going to be the old lady
Nibbler
who was playing Qbert and several other people.
Yet another culty moment. One thing that really made my hackles rise, and I don't know how this. I have hackles. I don't know if anybody else knows this. They're crazy.
Seems really personal.
They got tall. When he looks at her and he's telling her, I want you to go get this record. I want you to go, win this thing, but more important, he says,
don't lose this
bring
tape.
this tape. And he's like, you can lose everything, even the record you're going for, but don't lose
even
this
your
tape.
life.
Yeah, and he says that to his best buddy, supposedly. He's like, you can lose the tape, or you can lose your life, but don't lose this tape. And I'm like, why does he get to talk to everyone around him like this? It was very manipulative.
Well, he's got that cult of personality.
Now I'm falling into that trap of I'm not trying to like bash people, but at the same time,
Heaven forbid you say anything negative, Aaron.
I know.
Don't be like me.
I just know that
Don't you be like me.
Look, this is a true story. Over dinner last night, we were looking at pictures from the Met Gala because, there were a lot of interesting choices for how that went. It was a religious theme, right? So you had Rihanna show up dressed as the Pope, and then you had the Tesla guy show up with Grimes and just had a really interestingly chosen sort of neck spiky thing that everybody thought was a Tesla logo. I'm getting to a point. So
I don't even know what you're talking about.
My So-Called Life. What's the name of the guy that everybody liked from that? I'm asking the wrong person. Yes, Claire Danes, and he was in Blade Runner 2.
Oh, was that the same guy?
It's killing me that I knew his name up until this point.
I know who you're talking about. The guy she had a crush on that was like...
He was in Fight Club. He
does not help me at all.
He got the rails beat out of him.
Everyone's yelling it right now.
Oh, they are.
Hang on.
He was in Requiem for a Dream. He was...
Jared Leto?
Yes. He has a band. Everyone knows who this is. I think I have a mental block for a very specific reason. My daughters saw a picture of him on my phone and looked at Trish and said, "Oh, Mom, you should have married him instead of Dad."
So you're saying that Jared Leto is like Billy Mitchell?
No, I am not.
Okay. I'm just trying to draw the analogy.
No, I don't even know how I got there.
I do think they kind of look alike. Mostly the way he looked in Blade Runner.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does have that hair club for men, perfect beard.
And the long hair, the weird, straight, overly flat ironed.
Yeah, like you looked at the cover of a romance
I don't want to personally
novel,
attack Billy Mitchell.
Or Jared Leto, even though I will personally attack him now and lose. But it's an honor thing, right? Jared. Call me. We'll figure it out.
That's Jared.
That's Jared.
Anyway.
Yeah. Every kiss begins with K, buddy. That's all I'm saying. Where was I going?
You were saying that you were going to make a point by talking about the Met thing, whatever. Nope.
Not a point. Nothing there.
All right, good.
There was one. It's gone.
All right. Well, when it comes back later in the conversation, just shoehorn that bad boy right on in.
That was it. Just a little jewel for everybody. Just a little levity. Just had to let those hackles go
What did you
down.
have for dinner?
What did I have for dinner?
You were saying this was over dinner last night.
Oh,
we haven't talked about food yet during this podcast.
That's
and I
true.
feel
We went to a Thai restaurant called Nana, and I had some pad see ew. Got it.
Pad see ew.
Very,
Pad see ew.
my favorite Jared Leto ballad. Pad see ew.
Okay. Where were we? Oh, so
Hackles. We were talking about hackles.
you were talking about how it got your hackles up. That
there were lots of examples of that where
he was able to just be rude to people or be like, everything's about me. Me.
It was very culty. So you had instances where some of his friends would go into, in each of these cases where they showed where he was trying to get the record, where Weeby was trying to get the record, or when they were just eating dinner. Someone would always call Billy Mitchell and say, there's 13 people here. 3 of them are this, 3 of them are that, and no sign of it. Like it was a very structured.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they had been trained. I think that's what I was trying to figure out how to say is everybody around him seemed to have been trained.
Well, they seemed very aware that it was going to bother him and that he needed to know, but that he was too much of a to actually go there himself and see what's going on.
Because it wasn't just one time that this record was challenged that Billy Mitchell didn't show up and accept the challenge.
Well, right. So here's the weird thing in this movie, and this is where Michael got really angry, and this is where I got really angry, is
there's no sense of time.
Billy Mitchell has a film crew with him, like at his restaurant or his house or wherever they are. It doesn't say. And they're there in that town. Like, I believe. It doesn't really make it clear where they are exactly in space. But Steve Wiebe is
purpose.
Like...
I'm sure he was thankful for that after the movie came out.
Steve Wiebe is there in the arcade playing the game. All of these people are sort of trying to distract him and kind of being a little bit passive-aggressive to him and a little rude. And he's kind of there by himself. Like, he didn't come with his wife and kids at this point. He's just there.
Yeah.
All alone, sitting on a stool, and everyone around him is like friends with Billy Mitchell, and they're all kind of like obviously not wanting him to win. At the same time they're filming him, they've got these people filming Billy Mitchell, and that's what made it feel set up, but apparently that really is what happened. And so there are phone calls. Yeah. I was like, are they staging these phone calls to make it seem like they're having, but they were actually apparently live. And that's the part where the director was saying they had to cut some of the conversations out because of some sort of interstate. Maybe they were in a different state, but Billy Mitchell would not, come there.
Yes, I think in that case they were in different states.
Yeah, so maybe it wasn't. Later. Yeah, so anyway, he gets the score. Oh, that's what it was. So Billy Mitchell, in the meantime, has sent this tape that you just mentioned with the lady, the Kubert lady, a little old lady who apparently loves Kubert, just like me. God bless her. She goes there, and
she had a little Kubert plush toy.
So he gets the winning score, and they honor it. So he gets 985.6 on June 3rd. The next day, June 4th, this tape shows up. So in the movie, it looks like it happens like right afterwards, but apparently it was the next day.
Well, they do have that awkward moment of like, hey, go over to so-and-so's house. I've got a delivery. Like there's this
there's this weird theatrical thing. And they watch it. Yeah, they watch it and they're eating pizza and they're just like, woo.
Yeah, it felt like a weird frat kegger.
It's weird. So anyway, they watch it and it's the tape of Billy Mitchell scoring over 1 million on Donkey Kong.
And these are all, to be noted, these are all the judges for Twin Galaxies that are at this house.
Right. And so, let's see. Sorry, my computer is trying to scan itself. So that happens, and then
Does it need a minute?
Yeah, it needs a minute.
I mean, I can leave.
The next day, they come in and they make this big announcement. Now, Steve Wiebe is still there in the arcade, and they're just like, "Hey."
It feels like he's been there all night.
It feels like he's just sitting there, like they didn't even get. He didn't even get a hotel room. Like he's just sitting there on the stool.
And he's just
right, exactly. And so they play this videotape, and while they're playing it in the arcade, they start making notes, like verbally, of like weird, like it's not glitches. It's almost like the screen where the score is kind of like does this weird VCR tape, like fuzz thing on it.
If you've ever had an old VCR and you never clean the tracking heads on it, you remember how things would just start to drift,
warble and warp.
But it was more than that. It was like, it wasn't just the VCR that wasn't handling it. It was like, it was a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, it looks like a triple copy. But anyway, it was a copy of a tape.
Yeah.
He had kept the original himself.
You notice they had the TV sideways?
I don't know. It's weird. But at any rate, the score looks like right as it's rolling over to 1,000,000, where it just goes to all zeros, the thing sort of, I don't know, the image gets warped right there. And it's weird. And they shows it a bunch of times in the documentary. Yeah. And even the guy, the owner of the entire place,
he
is
had a
like,
very cautious phone call with him afterwards.
The referee dude is like,
he's like, I just want to make sure.
He was like, oh, no, the original is totally clear. It's just because it's a copy. And he's like, okay. So initially he's like, well, I'm not submitting this as a real thing.
Well, that was what was interesting, is because, listening to that from a legal environments of business sort of standpoint, he was very obviously trying to say, don't do this, dude. Because he was like, all right, just want to make sure, you initially said you didn't want to submit this as a score. Is this what you really want to do? Oh, okay. So the other
But then at the end of the conversation, he's like,
after offering.
Oh, I don't see any problem in submitting the score.
Right. It turns into, oh, hey, bro, I'm your bro. We totally like your bro work.
Sup, dude?
You got more bro work? Send me some.
Right. And so they totally accept the score. And so Steve Wiebe had his record for like an hour.
And then they had make this huge ceremony of like going back into what looks like a kitchen and then typing into a spreadsheet.
That's right.
And they're entering it into the internet. This
onto
is just
the
me
internet.
being a snobby developer.
Right.
I'm like, what? That's Excel.
But what was so weird was that and poor Steve Wiebe's just sitting over there like,
can I see the video?
They were like, oh no, we can't show you the video. Even though Billy Mitchell watched his video.
That's what everybody, even around, you started to see his friends kind of sour just a little bit here and there before the midichlorians kicked back in, where they were like, I just don't understand. Like, he got to watch all of Wiebe's stuff. To figure out how to win.
They slip up a few times like that. But what's weird is that they even have footage of Billy Mitchell saying it's really important. You can't. You have to play it live. You can't just all this kind of stuff and like hyping that up. And then literally,
his quote was that Tiger Woods could shoot a 56 or 53. I'm not good at golf, and it wouldn't matter. But if he did it at Augusta, that's where it counts. Right. Is what he was saying. So he's like, come to Augusta. This is clearly before any of this.
This was before all of this. And so they forced this guy, basically. They wouldn't accept there were 4 things he submitted in video, and they wouldn't accept any of those. But then they're literally the next day going to accept Billy Mitchell because it's Billy Mitchell. So then the next year, in 2006, I don't know exactly when this is. I'm looking at this list of dates, but it looks like Steve Wiebe won with a video in 2006, but he goes sometime after this, and maybe it was in 2005, down to Florida, Hollywood, Florida, which is where Billy Mitchell lives.
And there's a championship being hosted by the Twin Galaxies group.
And so
even
Steve Wiebe is
there.
like, he brings his kids, he brings his wife, they get on a plane and they fly like from freaking Washington State to Florida, this nowhereville in Florida, to play this thing. And he's there the whole time like playing, whatever. He's psyched out. He choked again. But he's playing and like thinking Billy Mitchell is going to show up and play him in person.
I think that's what probably psyched him out the worst, is that he went to his hometown and thought, surely
he's literally right down the street.
Once again, this in the world of documentaries, they tell a very good story. So we don't know what really was said back and forth. There's times where he's like, have you talked to Billy? Yeah, I talked to him 3 days ago. But in the documentary, it's like he leaves a voicemail. So I don't know if he's just misrepresenting a voicemail or if they really talked. It's hard to say. And
he literally pulls up in a car in the movie.
Oh, yeah, and he's
there.
He's got jokes too. He's like, hey, you guys mind? I got a celebrity with me. And
he walks into the arcade where Steve Wiebe is. Steve Wiebe's there playing Donkey Kong, and he walks in and he's like, Steve Wiebe looks back and sees Billy Mitchell with Billy Mitchell's wife walking through, and he's kind of like looks kind of awkward and stuff like that, and he goes, "Hey, Billy," and Billy doesn't say anything to him, and then he's like, "There's some people I just don't really want to spend a lot of time talking to." He says that to his wife. And that was so rude on camera with a lav mic that it made me wonder if it was like real. But apparently they've done, and I've read like several interviews with a lot of the people involved, and they're all like, yeah, that's what happened. And I was just like, wow. I mean, if that really is true, what a like, what a
Yeah, it was very bizarre. He cited as his reason for not competing live at those. I really think he was scared. I don't think he 100%. He felt ready to do it.
He said he hadn't played in a year or something like that.
He said they didn't give him enough advanced warning.
Right.
But this documentary had been going on for long enough that this is just me thinking. And I think this is where Wiebe brought and forgive me for saying this, but he came from being a jock. I think he brought some of that discipline. So he decided he had a goal, and he literally sat in his garage and just worked and worked and worked. And he was drawing on, at one point he had drawn on his cabinet to actually get that timing just right for getting up the ladder. He was ready. Like, he was kind of at peak. And he was even using superstition. I think
he was Mr. T in Rocky too.
They liberally played a lot of Karate Kid music in that documentary as well.
They really did.
But, here's an interesting
me.
You're the best around.
No one's going to ever keep you down. I'm cutting that out.
Nah, man, you got to lead in.
No, man.
You got to lead in there. I loved when he sent the fourth tape apparently in. And I don't even know how... I would not want to do this as a parent. They left in the bit where he's playing the game and his boy is like, wipe my bottom. And he's like,
wipe my butt. Dad, like, stop playing Donkey Kong.
I'm about to get and I was very impressed with how composed he was. There have been times when I don't want to brag. There are times when I definitely was a little more snappish when I was
wanted to know what you thought about that so much while I was watching it on the plane the other day. I was just like, I wonder what Aaron is thinking when he's watching this as someone, because like it made me want to murder that kid. But it's probably different when you actually have kids. It's frustrating, I'm sure. You can hear his frustration.
Oh, absolutely. And you hear that. It's interesting because when you have kids, you have a very big responsibility.
Sure.
But what you don't see on TV is that you cope with that behind closed doors. Like, you figure out how to give and take, and it's not always pretty. It's certainly not supposed to be pretty. That's a part of the learning process for them and for you as a parent. I realize now when I look at my parents, I think I've told them this, that I realized that when they had me, they were just kids with a kid. Like, they didn't know what they were doing. And by the time I was old enough to start remembering, they had several years to figure things out. So, the fact that he allowed, or that he was talked into, and I think it was because he said, I don't think he had a choice because that was on the tape he submitted. And I'm sure that the small amount that we heard wasn't the entire altercation, because that boy had poop on his butt and needed help wiping it.
That's right.
And as a dad, I was just sitting there going, wow, of all the things short of injury that you really have to pull away to help with. Like, there's a part of you as a dad that's probably just like, I guess he's going to figure out how to wipe his own butt
Today's
tonight.
the day. Yeah. You're going to learn today.
Yeah, I got some important video gaming to do, boy.
That's right.
And it's not going to be popular amongst all of the people watching, but you know what?
I think
it's raising kids, man.
What I read on this Blogspot thing is that was actually from his first tape.
That's interesting.
So it wasn't the over 1 million score tape that was submitted and rejected. But at any rate, it was a tape that he had
immediately
submitted.
After that was when they talked about the million tapes. So that was just kind of clever editing, I think.
Yeah, there was some clever editing, but ultimately you can't. This is all so granular.
And I don't mean sinister editing.
We're at an hour into our podcast and we're not even thing.
You can cut out the Jared Leto stuff. It's fine.
No, I'm not even criticizing, but I'm just saying there is a lot here, and we're just kind of skimming the surface. Even we are. There's so much. there's so many like YouTube videos and podcasts and people talking about this. And of course, the gaming world, who's been following this in real time for all these years, there's a ton of stuff, as you can imagine, on Reddit. There's a ton of stuff on the Twin Galaxies blog or forums. I'm sorry.
I read quite a bit from Twin Galaxies because following this documentary where he was not able to beat the score where Mitchell didn't rise to the occasion to defend his score.
Right. But he still remained like the champion.
Billy Mitchell remained the champion, and they do make a note as like the early days before the Avengers did it. They had like a brief little spot right before the credits ended where they're like, and by the way, we beat this score in this date, and they did the fancy little line drawing showing him going up above Billy Mitchell, and that's kind of where they left it. There was a lot that happened after that,
right?
But in the news recently was that there's new leadership at Twin Galaxies. There's new leadership at this referee group. And a lot of these complaints, not just, I think this drew a lot of attention to it, but there were other issues, prompted them to do their own investigation of this incident with Billy Mitchell and Weeby. And
it doesn't hurt that the founder of Twin Galaxies left back in 2010, I believe, to go be a musician.
A butterfly. I think.
He's the butterfly from the last unicorn.
And the butterfly effect. I don't know if you know this.
Right, both.
But
yeah, so he's been gone.
He wanted to do it full time.
And then there's a guy, Jace something, that sort of took over, I think it was last year. And there's a guy back in February.
Things like that won't last long in this world of vote up if it's good, vote down if it's bad.
Right. Well, there's been a guy who's been like really challenging, this entire the scores of Billy Mitchell for all of time, because there are people now, because a lot of these videos, certainly one of his videos has been made public, and you can also see footage in not only in the documentary itself, but in the extra features, special features.
A lot of these
There's
available.
a lot of this stuff, and you can literally pull the screens up from Billy Mitchell's games that were submitted. So at the end of, like I think in 2006, right before the end of this documentary, Steve Weeby had submitted a tape. They did accept it because he had shown himself to be someone who could play really well. And so they did accept his score. But then, like, right after that, Billy Mitchell also did a thing and beat him again. So it was just back and forth, back and forth. Well,
yeah, but Billy Mitchell was just palpitating for like 18 years.
He super was. More than that, really.
Yes.
And so, but since that time, other people have beaten both of them. Like, other people have come in and...
The most recent record holder is like a neurosurgeon.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know. I think that guy even got beaten.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Several people. There's Hank Chen. I'm not sorry.
There's like
I'm
a
sorry.
dog pile of
There's
just
him, and then there's
amazing
Robbie Lakeman, Wes Copeland. And so Robbie Lakeman, Wes Copeland, they're back and forth, like winning.
I think Weeby is now 12th on the chart.
Yeah, I think so. That like 4 records were set in 2016 alone.
Yeah.
So between Wes Copeland set 3 of those and Robbie Lakeman set 1.
And bear in mind, these are as required on original cabinet with the original circuit boards. So there's, I don't know what the shelf life on this is. At some point, I think there will be a twilight of even being able to compete in original
I would
cabinet.
imagine so.
Because they just don't make those chips anymore. I don't
but
know
so
how
people have analyzed the footage, though, and there are videos that you can actually watch that show it like thing by thing. One of them is, okay, I'm going to have to mark this because I'm going to have to try to remember the name of the guy.
While you're doing that, it's interesting to note that all of his records have been taken away. Like all of them have been expunged because of what we were just talking about. The fact that they were able to prove that in at least one very obvious case, and probably more, he did not tell the truth about the score. Can't even prove it was him that did it. Well,
I mean, the main thing that in the official statement from Twin Galaxies, there's this guy, and I don't know if this was the only guy that they used this. There was a guy who challenged the record, but then there was also Apollo Legend, who has a great YouTube video that breaks down the whole cheating thing and shows you all the evidence. Now, he's just compiling evidence gathered by other people, but it's a really great video, and it has a whole lot of...
And from what I understand, that was taken into account, but they still had independent
Oh, they absolutely had other stuff too.
Yeah.
And they state that in this very long written statement. It's on their website. You can read it. You can go there.
Talk about wordsmithed.
I mean, clearly
Holy
lawyers
cow.
wrote this thing, but they talk about how basically it's clear from the way the screens, like from level to level, transition, the way that things appear on the screen, and this is what you can see in that Apollo Legend video, is that it may not be MAME. They can't prove definitively that it's MAME, but they know that it's not an original board because the way that the screens transition on original boards are different from MAME or any other modified thing. So they just know it's been in some way modified and it doesn't meet the criteria.
And
so there's no debating it.
Of like that this was captured from a computer screen instead of filmed or from an analog line out of a cabinet.
Right.
So like there were ways to hijack the signal going to the screen and actually tape it directly from that where you'd get a nice clean view. But if you're capturing it from software, then you don't have any of those analog artifacts and then you're getting actually what was coming off of that chip. And I know I'm getting a little techie, but I think in some cases when things are too good, they're like, you can't do this with 1980s tech. You just can't get that quality of screen off of it.
Right.
I can see every pixel. It's ridiculous. Things run at different speeds, because the chips themselves were kind of hardwired at a certain speed. So if you're on software, having a faster CPU in your computer that you're emulating on can change the speed that certain things happen. And then the biggest concern, and by the way, they have no problem with people using MAME to get a record, but it has to go compete with other people who are using MAME to do it. There's a separate standing list for just original cabinets. And so, if this had been submitted as a MAME entry and other rules had been followed, so there were probably still some things he wasn't supposed to do, then that would have qualified for a record in Donkey Kong on MAME. They just differentiate between that and someone who's actually got a real cabinet and is doing it the way it was done in 1980, whatever, when it came out. I have a couple of emulators and play games like that sometimes too, but there is definitely the ability to pause. So you can just hit pause and it freezes the game exactly where it is. And you can walk away for 3 days, drink some Gatorade.
Nice.
And then
Wipe your kid's butt.
Yeah, he could have gotten up and wiped his kid's butt in that moment. You can do things like save a state. And if you make a mistake, you can hit a button and just jump back 13 seconds and keep going. So you have tons of unfair advantages. Whether or not he used those, I don't know. But there's just reason to wonder. Well,
so there was the committee who was evaluating it, and they had a lot of other information, not just that the screen transition thing, but apparently some other information that was behind the scenes stuff that we don't have access to. But then also Billy Mitchell himself was given the opportunity to respond and comment during this time, and he didn't.
It was his right.
And he also was able to choose a person of his own choosing to go and also evaluate the evidence to sort of on his behalf, sort of like an attorney in a way. It wasn't an attorney. It was another gamer guy. And that guy was got it right in front of me, and of course I can't see it on the page.
Sutherland.
Carlos Pinheiro.
Oh.
So he
of
goes
the
in.
Pinheiro Bread Company.
Right. But he goes in, and he also ends up agreeing with, like, the guy that Billy Mitchell picked to defend him basically ended up kind of going, sorry, dude, but it looks like this is not an original cabinet.
That was really happening to Billy Mitchell a lot. Even his best friend sitting at the table next to him was asked point blank, do you believe what Weeby said was true to a degree? I mean, they were trying to figure out. And he's like, from all I can tell, the guy is a straight shooter who's honest and just wants to tell you the truth. And then they look at Billy and say, what's your opinion? He goes, well, I'm not familiar with the situation.
I'm not familiar enough with the situation.
And
he has the dead face, He
was like,
the shark eyes.
If you go to / watch people die inside, this is a clear example of what you do there.
Yeah.
Because he's just,
Yeah,
man, he's got hot sauce. He doesn't need these video game things.
It's so funny to me because, well, clearly he does, because he has come out and made a big public statement since all of this happened. I mean, this just happened, it's currently May of 2018. He came
March,
out,
right, when it all went down.
I mean, it's real recent. And he came out and said, no, I've got evidence to prove that I'm innocent and I'm 100% like.
Billy Mitchell's always got a plan.
Gold. It's gold, baby.
So.
I just think it's interesting, and I don't know if you came across this too during all of this craziness, but it was also somewhat recently that there was another video gamer who was like holding a world record high scores named Todd Rogers, who kind of started a lot of this higher scrutiny. He was a guy.
Galaxy's post that you were talking about cites other large cases, saying this is not the first time we've had to take this medicine.
This would be like another big one. So this is a guy who played a lot of the Activision games, and he was actually stripped of all of his scores, and Guinness stripped him of his scores and stuff like that. It's pretty clear. It's pretty interesting. There's a video also by Apollo Legend detailing all of this, and that one came out first. So all of this stuff with Todd Rogers broke first. And then there's a guy named OmniGamer who has a great video where he makes a big spreadsheet, and it sounds like the most boring video in the world. But
I love a video of a spreadsheet.
He literally shows how the scores are calculated in this particular game. Oh,
okay. There is some mention in Donkey Kong that was also a logic that was used, that the score he got to was impossible.
Yeah. And this is like
not impossible, but
Dragster,
impossible with what was seen.
Dragster is the game that this Todd Rogers guy would play, and apparently the score that he claims to have gotten is impossible in the form, like the way the game is built. Like mathematically, it's impossible.
Well, that's an interesting proof. So just the number itself.
It's like doing a math problem, and literally, like they show you how they build the Excel formulas, and they literally like build it on the screen right in front of you.
You're a strange person.
Oh my God, it's so exciting. I love spreadsheets, and I love math, and I love like finding out that people are cheaters, and it's just like everything I love. I was watching this thing. Michael's just completely asleep next to me on the couch, and I'm like watching this guy. It's literally a screen of his computer, like filling out a spreadsheet.
Tell me they did a pivot table.
I wish.
Oh my gosh. So close.
They're like, see if you the best way to win. Like, it's almost like you could use a spreadsheet to figure out how to beat this game. But anyway, the point is that it's not possible for him to win.
Yeah, it's like with Donkey Kong. Everyone was super excited that they got to the kill screen, right? That's it. The game ends in 5 seconds once you get to that screen. So how are people getting higher scores? Well, it's not because of getting to this point of the game that you have the high score. It's because of how you got there. So, you get points for things like...
It's the journey, man.
It's the journey, man. Your friends were just the warehouses you met along the way. But, when you break a barrel or when you do a specific thing, you would get so many points.
Sure.
And there are people who are just, they're mentats, and they stare at this video and they count all of these actions and add them up, and then they look at the score at the top of the screen and go, there's no way. They simply did not earn those points, or, it just doesn't add up. And then they tell you how to get from point A to point B without hitting a star. Wait, that's Spacing Guild. But anyway.
So my thing with all of these folks, including Billy Mitchell, as much as I think he, as a human being, leaves something to be desired, but
so do I.
You think that, or you are like that?
Look, I'm no Jared Leto, is all I'm saying.
Clearly.
Man, it just doesn't stop.
I just feel like I could never do what any of these people do.
No. I went back and tried to play Mega Man, a game I loved. I was ready to throw everything I owned out the window like it was an ex-boyfriend. Just
I can't get past the first screen of Frogger. I'm just gonna,
I used to be able to.
I'm sitting here like in judgment, but I mean, all of these people are so far beyond my skill in any of this that it's really impressive. And I mean, Billy Mitchell clearly does have the chops to play these video games. Like he does, he's really good at them. I just feel like it's kind of like Lance Armstrong, right? Like he's very talented. Yeah. He's got a lot of skill and a lot of ability.
I'm not going to race him on a bike.
No, I'm not even, no. But he's still kind of a like he lied. He cheated other people who were also working really hard and who are really good at what they were doing. And that's where I have the problem,
And here's the really spooky thing. A lot of them were doing that too.
A lot of who are doing what?
Well, in any industry that you want to name where doping has become a thing, usually the biggest villains are the ones who got discovered first.
Yeah, but I just kind of feel like Lance Armstrong's just a d in general.
Well, that may be the case.
And kind of like Billy Mitchell. That's kind of why I use that analogy. Like the whole cheating on his wife and then leaving, what's her name? Shania Twain? No. They're all the same chick as far as I'm concerned.
Every day is a winding road.
Sheryl Crow?
There you go.
Okay. Whatever. But yeah, I mean, she got cancer, right? And he left her.
Ooh, that's not going to make you any friends at the grocery store.
I mean, it's just kind of dirty.
You know, that's what I'm preoccupied with is how many friends
friends you make at the grocery store?
At the grocery store.
What kind of grocery store are you going to? Is it the same one where the person in the back is like singing about the milk?
If you have to ask, then you don't belong at the grocery store. And yes, it's the one with the little milk jugs. They're like, I hope you buy some milk today. Super awesome milk, I say.
So,
it's white and cold and in a cup.
To wind all of this up, I just wanted to ask you, have you ever watched the regular show?
Yes, I have.
Did you see the...
Yes, I did.
Okay. If you haven't seen, if you do sort of either not know about this is really funny. So the regular show has this character called Garrett Bobby Ferguson. And actually, it's clearly modeled after Billy Mitchell. It's just he's a giant head with teeny little arms and legs.
And
he's got the hair and the beard, and he cheats at video games, and he's a total jerk. And Billy Mitchell sued them for that.
Methinks he doth complain too much.
The judge threw it out of court.
But did you... To me, the punchline was what she said to him.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if she said that. Is she the one that said, like, the villain thing?
It's in quotes.
Okay,
it
great.
says, and that may not be what you're thinking.
Okay.
But Judge Ann Thompson threw out the lawsuit, and I'm reading from Wikipedia here,
Great.
saying that the television character does not match the plaintiff in appearance. I was like, the blank space at the end of that sentence was what cracked me up.
Oh.
He doesn't look like you.
Nice.
So.
It's the timing of the, yeah.
I'm not very good at... Anyway,
yeah, there was an article. It was on, I don't remember where it was. I apologize. Whoever wrote it, it was pretty funny. They were like, yeah, because GBF is clearly a cartoon villain and Billy Mitchell is just a regular villain.
I don't think
that's
official
genius.
Court statement.
No, I thought that's what I was like, man, I wish the judge had said that. That would have been amazing.
And then you heard...
She's not really a judge. She's an arbitrator.
Wow. Just spoil all my dreams. Well, that was a lot of fun. I mean, ups and downs. I learned something, and I did a lot of reading on this. So.
I listened to so many podcasts. I watched so much stuff. And I mean, it's just a sordid tale.
And we're talking about Donkey Kong.
We are talking about Donkey Kong,
so
but
let's not get started on Nibbler or Centipede or Missile Command or any of those because it just gets weirder.
I'm just kind of happy in a way that, you know, it does kind of make me feel glad. Not really, but kind of, that they took his scores off. And, I mean, Steve Wiebe finally is getting a little bit more of, like...
That's what I felt really good about.
I did, yeah.
Last I heard, he had released a contemporary Christian album.
That's right, yeah.
And he's he's guested on various movies. He's got an interesting career going on.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for all I know, he's still a science teacher. And what I loved is they interview a couple of kids from his school, and the girl sitting there talking about it, she didn't realize that it was a world record, but she's wearing an Invader Zim t-shirt, which I was just like, yes.
Was she really?
Yes, it had Gurr. It had Gurr in the middle
awesome.
of it. And I was like, yes, somebody else who knows what that is.
So that is a fistful of quarters. No, that's not the name of it. It's
Look.
That is the subtitle of the movie.
Cool Hand Donkey Kong.
Cool Hand Donkey Kong.
No, that wasn't it. Any Which Way But Donkey Kong.
Any Which Way But Kong. No, that was...
Clint Eastwood. That was such a great movie.
No, it wasn't.
Monkeys.
King of Kong, everybody. King of Kong. That was, you should check it out if you haven't seen it. You don't need to anymore. If you've listened to this whole podcast, you don't really need to watch it.
I would still watch it. It was just my second viewing years later.
Yeah.
I sat through it in an hour and 20 minutes.
I watched it on the plane and I was cursing out loud. The person next to me was like, what's wrong with this chick?
I do that anyway, so they never know if it's because of what I'm watching or just because that's what I do.
It was nice because I have a terrible fear of flying, and it was a short flight from New Orleans, and I'm there, and I'm like watching this thing on my phone, and I was so like into what was going on that I kind of like was oblivious, which was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. So yeah. Amazing.
I know.
After all those beignets.
Such a good story.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good times.
Life is better now. All right, well, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.